Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Can You Hear Me podcast. I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communications.
And I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the Harbinger Group, a marketing and strategy firm. Today, we're going to talk about the Great Resignation 2.0 because we've been here before.
That's right.
Today, yes, so we're revisiting this situation because it seems to be back. This isn't the mass exodus that occurred back in 2021. That's when so many employees were unhappy with their jobs and just decided to actively look for new ones. Buckle up, everybody, because it really looks like this is happening again. I mean, it's perplexing to me, but it's here. It's back, and we're all going to have to deal with that situation. So we're going to dive deep into the reasons behind this perplexing resurgence and exploring the broken promises, also unmet expectations that are driving employees to seek the greener pastures.
You know what, Eileen, I was just reading something today about the great stay of 2024 where people weren't as actively searching for those opportunities.
Yeah.
That was so 2024. We are in 2025 and everything is changing. So the data paints a really concerning picture. According to a recent survey published at the end of 2024, over half, in fact, 56% of full-time employees in the U.S. are looking to switch jobs in 2025. And not only that, nearly a third are so restless, they're willing to quit their current positions, even without having something new lined up. This highlights the urgency of understanding why so many talented individuals are leaving and feeling this way. So it is very interesting. And it happened a few years back, and now it's happening again. And you wonder, to what do we attribute that? So what say you?
Well, I think that comfortable, I wouldn't even call it comfortable. I would call it the safety move of 2024 of staying in your job. There was a lot of wait and see what was happening because the rumblings about the economy, which frankly never came true.
Right.
Our
Right.
economy's terrible. Eggs cost $10. I
Right.
mean, we could go on, right? None of that, thankfully, it turned out to be true. But people were in this mode of, gosh, we better just hunker down and see what happens. Whether it was with the election, whether it was with layoffs that they kept hearing about were looming at their organization, and maybe they wanted to take the exit package. There was just a lot of moving parts, and people felt the best move was to just sit tight and write it out and see what's going to happen. Well, it seems like in the last month or so, things have become much more clear. And I think that the data that you just cited, that was from very late in December of 2024, shows evidence of that, okay, election's behind us. We have seen lots of, we'll call it reassuring insights from the Fed and all other moves of that nature. Unemployment remaining really low, so people feel like I'm in a bit of a power position now. And let's tack on the fact that in the last quarter of 2024, many large employers, in fact, huge employers like Chase and others, have just kind of brought down the hammer on hybrid or remote work situations and have been in large numbers calling employees back to the daily commute and all that goes along with that. So we'll get into it in a bit later, but the push-pull of why, whether I get pushed out the door because of internal circumstances or pulled to a better situation because I know there are greener pastures, as we said earlier. There's tons of factors contributing to why this is happening now, but it really feels like it happened pretty fast, didn't it?
Well, yeah, it does, because the thing that was interesting was obviously 4 years ago, the pandemic, changed a lot, and all of a sudden there was this great resignation that was a thing, and you really felt like the employees, for the first time maybe ever, had some leverage, and I think they were using it, and that was kind of a main premise of that. And then in recent years, it feels like some of that changed and the employers had it back. For instance, we're going to call everybody back to the office, just like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And now people are like, Yeah, that's, I mean, again, that's a big point that we're going to dive into in a little bit,
Yep.
but man, it is, how do you, I don't know how you unring that bell. And what's interesting,
Yeah.
you were talking about Chase and, Jamie Dimon and places like that, some of these really great brands in business and, worldwide, calling people back 5 days a week. And I was just talking to a client of mine who's high up the food chain at his organization, who's like, I would call them all back. Jamie Dimon's calling everybody back. You can't do professional development. You can't do mentoring. You can't do that on. I mean, so that was his pitch to me recently, and
Interesting.
and he didn't really have any way of impacting that. I mean, he's high up, but he wasn't like making the decision.
Yeah.
But the fact that that's a discussion point at that organization is interesting because we've
Yeah.
heard, hey, because this company has a hybrid work environment, and 3 days a week you're there, 2 days a week you're not,
Hmm.
and now it's like, oh, they should be back all the time. So the fact that people are feeling that way, um, I think it changes the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, it sure does. Well, I just want to point out that recurring tension about the what can and can't be done in a remote environment. I really think that that is what's at the root of that. I should say is the fact that we have four different generations present in the workplace right now.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, and those, of course, who are at the older age range, experience range of those generations, think that their way is the only way, and because they just haven't lived long enough in a remote environment, and the tension at the other end of that generational spectrum, those two generations are like, what are you talking about? Of course it can.
right.
Some of them went
And
to college in
especially
a
somebody
remote
who
environment.
has had a remote work environment for so many years, like Eileen
Sure.
Rochford and the Harbinger
For
Group.
sure, for sure. Yeah, but I'm just hearing from more of that generational representation lately, and reading much more about um, their experiences, and I think that that cannot be underestimated. If you're a leader who wants to keep the people you have and develop the people that you have to take all of that into account. You can't just assume that the perspectives of those at the older, more experienced range of generations in your workplace are 100% right. Because frankly, that retirement cliff is looming, and we're all going to be
Sure,
impacted by that. So just keep that in
absolutely.
mind. If
No,
you're
great point.
really serious about this, pay attention. I think that this boomerang of the Great Resignation 2.0 coming at us within 4 years means that this is something that should be tended to, and there's quite a bit of ways to do that. So
And
let's talk.
HR and
Yeah,
leadership everywhere should be feeling the
yeah,
same way about it like they did the first time, which is we've invested so much money in these people
yeah,
to professionally develop them. We can't afford,
for sure.
we want to attract and we want to retain. That's pretty basic. It's been the way it's been for a long time. And you don't want to spend all that kind of money having to time and
Yeah,
effort and money
uh,
trying to get that
onboarding
done.
alone and the loss of productivity, right?
Right?
Just a couple of reminders.
Yep.
So let's just cover, why are people wanting to quit? What is at the root of that mindset as recently as the end of December in 2024. So the survey found that workers, they're quitting their jobs over a couple things. The first and the biggest is, we all know this, it's low pay. So if
Yep.
they perhaps went through their end of year um, bonus and raise conversations, and they're kind of like, really, that's it? Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's probably contributing to the timing of that number going up so high to 56%. Because remember, what you cited before, Rob, was a lot lower.
Yeah.
I believe that it was
It
like
was.
in July of last year, it was closer to 1 in 3. Now it's
Yep.
more than half. So that's in 6 months that changed. Okay. So, whoa, we have something to deal with. No doubt about that. Second highest reason is overly stressful work environments. Um, and I would just say that's probably a combination of an overly stressful life and
Yeah.
job
Yeah.
coming together. It's never just one. That's at 43%. And then the desire for better benefits, 44%. Again, end of year, they probably got their news about cuts in their healthcare benefits, for example. Maybe they got rid of the life insurance plan. Maybe they're no longer offering dental or vision. All kinds of things can get taken away that make people feel like, well, wait, the value just isn't as great as it was. And yet you're still expecting me to do 1.5 jobs within the work week. And you're telling me I can no longer have a hybrid situation that kind of eases that pain a bit. So all of these, there's never one reason. It's always a combination. So we got to keep that in mind.
And the benefits thing cannot be understated because as I was, my small, Rob Johnson Communications, I have group plan through one of the major insurers, and it went up, like 20, 15, 20%. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. And these companies just keep hiking and hiking and hiking and acting,
No
and
getting
and it,
around
it
it.
feels like they're almost tone deaf to like what's really going on in the world.
Yeah.
And
No getting around
it,
it.
it's
It's a
like
fact of life.
it's for everybody. So even if you have an employer, contribution, a plan through your employer, you're getting hammered. People
Oh
like
yeah.
me,
We pay full freight for employee healthcare benefits at our firm. And our increase was 14%.
yeah,
And our broker, who's amazing, said, you're
yeah,
getting off easy.
that's
And when
true.
I asked around to fellow, business owners of similar sizes, and even, on up to kind of like the, just below the small to mid threshold, absolutely. I heard out of the dozen different conversations I had that their increases were as high as 20, like yours. So
Yeah,
14%. So if you think about that, you split that in most cases. I think the vast majority of employers still expect employees to pay for half of that. So suddenly
sure.
they got whacked with, say 15% more on something that already probably per month for their family was, $700, $600. So that gets meaningful in terms of money. So finding ways like it's cheaper for an employer to cover that cost, honestly,
Yeah.
and to write it off as a operating expense than it is to pass it off. Just just ask yourself the question: should we be paying more? Because that alone could be the difference maker. That's just one. I wouldn't call that creative.
Right.
I would call that's kind of many right now. Employers are saying no way. We want to give them more of the cost, not less of the cost. But
And
I
and
think you
and when
should
you
be
feel like
thinking
you're
the other
losing
direction.
ground, like you're losing ground, and it's like, okay, we're going to give you way worse benefits than we used to, just because it's getting so expensive. Just because
Yeah.
these companies are like, we're just going to hike. We don't care. We're going to hike the rates.
It's all
So
about profit. That's why we all know
oh, of
that. But
course, yeah.
in
I
every
mean, yeah.
sector, it's
Uh,
about profit.
and in some would agree it's about exorbitant profit.
No doubt. Yeah.
Because when
We're
everybody
not
says,
here to
well,
solve the health
no, we're
insurance.
not. But I'm just saying that's one piece that you just brought up. All right, I'll get back on the okay, train leaving the tracks, now getting back on. Here we go. So let's talk about proactive measures that are needed to avoid another mass exodus. You know how much I love the Harvard Business Review as a professional development tool. I use it a lot. It recently published a series of articles exploring the root causes of employee dissatisfaction. In the piece titled Why Employees Quit, the authors identify four key quests that drive people to seek new jobs. One, they want to get out, they want to escape from a bad situation. Number two, they want to regain control, take more ownership over their work. Number three, regain alignment, feel like their skills and experience are valued. And number four, take the next step, pursue new challenges and growth opportunities. That's where a lot of people are in the world. But I mean, the alignment piece is really interesting, I think,
Yep.
because because I feel like so many companies, and I know that we reference yours a lot because, you're the boss, but I feel like the things that you do with your whole culture and your team and alignment is so important. And maybe a lot of companies didn't used to do that. I know you've done it forever, but
Mm.
other companies started doing that to attract better talent during the pandemic and realizing they had to do more. And so being
Mhm.
aligned, being on the same page and pulling in the same direction, really had were major priorities. And
Yep.
it felt like in recent years, like, okay, we're kind of back to normal and the employer's back in charge and that sort of thing. But once you've had that alignment, once you've had that satisfaction for the work you're doing and feeling like it's important and it's valued, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, that went away too. Just like some of your benefits, that went away. I can understand that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that is probably the fastest way to go from happy to sad in a position in any company is to have the shift that you just described take place.
Yeah.
And we've all probably got stories. I have my own, a similar, like this is ages ago, but I had that situation where the company was perfect, the leadership was great, but then the kind of structural situation or organization changed, which impacted me in an interesting way. And suddenly it went from me reporting to someone whom I, deeply admired to a situation that, as described, just sounded wholly unsatisfying.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the trigger. That was the push. And you just talked about the push and the pull. We've all got them. I thought that the descriptions in particular in this HBR article were pretty enlightening. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read a couple of them just so our
No,
listeners
yeah,
can
I have it
appreciate
in front of
them.
me too. Please go ahead.
So there was this "I'm pushed when" section that I was like, oh yeah, because these are verbatims from the people who were interviewed. So I'm pushed when I don't respect or trust the people with whom I work. Yeah, there's that trust word yet again. And we talk about that so often on this show. So, tending to relationships and trust is something that we can do proactively to make it um, much more likely that our folks are going to want to stay and be with us,
Sure.
on our mission. So don't forget that tending to the relationships and the trust; those are so important, and giving opportunities for people to tell you, are they feeling trusted or do they feel like they trust, their manager, their colleagues? Have conversations as often as you can. I'm not talking about surveys. Those are fine. But if you're not actually having conversations frequently to, find the signals. So we've talked about in the past the importance of the weekly one-on-one with people who report to you or with your manager.
Mhm.
Um, Commit to the one-on-one again and make sure on your agenda that you've got a place where you're covering aspects of trust and the health of relationships with colleagues. That's a very proactive thing that people can do. It doesn't cost any money either. It's just
Oh, by the
about
way,
consistency.
that one's free, but you have to
That was
be committed.
free. Free is always good. Who didn't like that?
Oh,
Here's another one. I feel that the work I'm doing has little or no impact on the company, the world, or my life. That's kind of a big deal, but just, you can control the company part, right? So when we think about the company, how are you framing the projects and how they ladder up to big things that are meaningful for progress of the organization? If you're not doing that framing, whether it's in your one on ones, your team meetings, your organizational meetings, that's another easy and frankly free way that you can improve people's engagement and increase their feelings of, yeah, what I do here, it does matter. And I
yes.
like
Yep.
it. I like that feeling. And I want to keep doing it because I can see that it's going somewhere. And that's, as a leader, the inspirational element of your leadership should always be showing people the way forward and what their contributions are, to getting there. So there's another thing that you can do. Um, Stop micromanaging, because people say that the way that they're managed day to day just wears them down and they can't take it anymore and they want to leave. So
We talk about
quit
that.
the
How many times have we
micromanaging
talked
habit.
about that?
Yeah,
We've
just
sprinkled
stop.
that in probably 3 of the last 5 episodes because it's
So
so
isn't it interesting?
annoying
Yeah.
and nobody likes it. So
It's
you're
ex
like, well, if
but
no,
it's because there's a resurgence of it, just like this Great Resignation 2.0, Rob,
yeah,
like, there's a resurgence of it, and I think that that's why we're finding that topic, so relevant again. People are
I
doing it
agree.
again, so you gotta stop, just cut it out.
It is fascinating to see how, okay, something like that was really a product a first time of the pandemic, right? And
Yeah.
kind of how the rules changed, and then all of a sudden business got back to air quotes normal, and all of a sudden you have a bunch of people again. They're like, nah, don't like it, and it's
Yeah.
for entirely different reasons. And the dissatisfaction reasons may be the same, but we're at a different point in time now.
Right.
It's like, and I don't want to speak for all employers. I'm certainly not doing that, but it's like they went back to like, okay, this is the way it was, and so we're going to bring it back to the way it was. Except,
Yeah.
you can't unring the bell.
You
Like
can't.
the
You can
bell got
try.
rung, and things and the world moved, and it changed, and expectations for employees had changed, and some of these employers naturally didn't like the fact that they were giving up control and are trying to get it back. And now people are like,
Mhm.
no, don't like it. Except a lot of them do work remotely now. They do have the ability to not have to say, I don't want to grind it out 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way we did it before. That's what we're going to do. Then they're like, then you're going to be doing it without me.
The before times are the never again times, okay, people?
Mm.
Let's be real.
Absolutely.
Let's stop
Uh,
talking about the before times.
right,
One more
right.
thing I think we should address here, and that is
Yes.
that a verbatim response that HBR saw enough that they included in the summary was my work is dominating my life, and I sacrifice myself or my family to get things done. That is so like 2020, 2019. I thought those days were behind us, but yeah, they're even when you look at job descriptions right now for job postings, things, the scope of one position, the expectations of what people are being expected to cover. Now it looks like one and a half, sometimes two jobs. That's
Yeah.
unrealistic. You can try that for a cost cutting measure, but it's pretty much guaranteed that the wear and tear, I guess, on the employees' mental capacity, to sustain that amount of work and volume of work and pace of work, they're going to break, and you're not going to get any of what you need. So maybe rethink how much you put into one position and the expectations that are behind that. It's definitely a no-win situation. So when
Sure.
people get there, they're just going to jump as fast as they can. And frankly, I think
Right.
those are the people who are quitting who don't have a position in hand because they feel like they have no alternative because the impact is so bad, maybe on their own health or on their family life. So you should be able to see, those fissures as they are appearing. And again, through the one-on-ones, through taking care of people, being, empathetic in the way that you lead, keeping your eyes out for that would help you avoid the exorbitant cost and the impact of someone leaving the organization, especially someone who is, super key to the success of a department. So keep your eyes and ears open and ask, pay attention, be empathetic, and don't overload, one job position. Those are really proactive things that you can take.
But it really is, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? When, you hear the old, analogy, bird in the hand, the job you have, easier to find another job when you have a job. And can you imagine this dissatisfaction some people might have if they're like, I got to go, but you don't have
Yeah,
another job. Yeah, but I got to go. That speaks volumes, Eileen.
it absolutely does. So don't get to that point.
No, please don't.
Another
Yeah.
another stressor, or sorry, like flag to look out for is boredom. If you're not giving folks enough challenge, enough new, enough interesting, you gotta take like, your fruits and vegetables with, your McDonald's, right? So there's a balance in everything. So make sure that they're not getting bored, because when they're bored, that's when they're susceptible to someone they used to work with, a former mentor perhaps, or a
Yeah.
former boss who's gone on to a great gig elsewhere, reaching out and saying, hey, what are you doing these days? Let's talk. I've got a pretty interesting position open on my team, and I think you'd be great for it. They're going to take that,
Yeah.
the lure, that dangle. They're going to bite on that hook so fast if they're bored. So keep your eyes out for boredom.
That's right.
And always be kind of looking at the assignments that folks have, the projects that they're responsible for, as a really healthy mix of the necessary and the challenging and interesting that excite them. You got to have both.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, it's easy to identify the problem, and now I think we need to kind of give people some ideas about how employees or employers can combat the mass exodus, and also how employees can find resources to help them should they be part of this Great Resignation 2.0.
Okay, and thanks for pushing me in that direction, because sometimes I just go off. So
No,
I
no,
really
all
appreciate
your
your
information is
structure.
awesome. No, no, so
No,
it's
you're the
all
best.
good.
You're the best. Okay, so we're talking about combating this mess, or another
Yeah,
mass exodus, which is here. It's happening already. So let's catch up fast. Check out your compensation and benefits if you can. Um, Make sure that they're still really competitive, to the best of your ability. And if you can't give a huge raise right now, try and bake in other things that maybe are less expensive, that you haven't offered before. Like, add another dimension to your health benefits if you can. That's a lot cheaper. And it's something that you pay out in increments versus, a bonus to retain them, or, a
sure.
giant pay hike. Those things are far more expensive. So just look at your whole benefits package for places where you could kind of make it a little bit more enticing and interesting. So that's one thing that you can do.
Sure.
You can also prioritize career development. So this almost speaks to the boredom in a way, but more so, it demonstrates that you feel that that you highly value the individual employee, when I know you're interested in adding. I'll give you an example on my team. One person is a little less experienced and is deeply interested in expanding their skill set into the paid advertising realm,
Mm.
digital marketing. That is not something that's currently within the job description, but you know what? Because we heard that, we're creating
We
a
can do it.
pathway
That's
to
awesome.
developing that skill set. It's not like, more than a couple percentage points of their overall time at the moment, but it's something that we keep reflecting back, because it's important that people hear that you heard them and that you're helping them create, that path forward, so that they can add to their skill set toolbox, if you will.
And I got to say too, for so much of what I do in Rob Johnson Communications, I am I have work in so many different areas because other companies have prioritized the career development. They've said, listen, you need to be a better communicator. You need to do better on your presentations. You need to do better in public speak, whatever the case is. And that's why I have work. And so I'm not
Yeah.
trying to turn on me. What I'm trying to do is drive home the point that career development matters. That you
Yeah.
may be technically good at your job, but if you don't have some of those other skills, you may or not move up in your job.
Yeah. So help people do that. Help
Yeah,
them become better. That's an investment that they will highly value, and that will, honestly, if you do it right, help them stay at your organization and contribute to your organization even more. So that's
sure.
a great thing to do. So think about that, just as, not broadly, but individualized. People on your team, what have they told you? And if you don't know, go find out. What do they want to do in terms of, adding skills to their skill set toolbox? Another thing, employee recognition. If you're not currently uh, honoring, acknowledging, thanking people for the things that they're doing for the success of your organization, do that more often. Do it in authentic and meaningful ways, not lip service,
Right.
and just amp that up. Gratitude leads to the most positive feelings imaginable and the best brain chemistry you've ever seen. So the more you express it, the more and people hear it about themselves, the better they're going to feel about their job. That's also free and easy. Be more flexible. I know we just talked about organizations that are saying, get your butts back to the home office.
Right. Right.
That's okay. But if you're going to do that, then also try to be more flexible too. Maybe add another day or two of sick time, so that they can get to doctor's appointments when doctor's offices are open. Um, their regular, annual checkups and things that are really hard to schedule. Just be more flexible. Let people have a little more time so that they can get the things done so that their lives don't feel so unmanageable.
Yeah.
That's a big tip. And
And
then,
and let me
yeah,
let
go
me
ahead.
just jump on that for a real quick second. The person that was saying everybody should be back in the office 5 days a week was also lamenting the fact that they have a hybrid work schedule, 3 days in the office, and he said nobody should ever be going to the doctor 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. If you have Monday and Friday to,
I can't
yeah,
even. I can't
it's
even. Do you
just,
know how hard it is to get appointments? Like,
oh, of
be
course. I mean,
realistic.
and
If
it's
you're
like
that
three,
out of
four
touch
months.
with reality, you're never going to retain
Could be. I'm
employees.
just telling you
I hear you.
anecdotally what I
I
was hearing.
know.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just
Oh,
saying
it's
this
wrong.
was an actual conversation. I know this was an actual conversation I had.
Yes. Again, um, be more empathetic and be
Yeah.
more flexible. Don't
There
be
you
like
go.
whoever it was Rob's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And lastly, the strengthening of leadership in your overall culture. So go, double down on your values and really live them and make sure that your the people who are in leadership positions in your organization are emblematic. They reflect your values and that they have been given the support to advance and evolve as leaders of today, leaders who understand the work environment, the life environment, the world environment, and can lead accordingly.
Good stuff. I just want to revert back quickly to the Harvard Business Review, the article that you were referencing, why employees quit, and you had some really good color around that. The
Yeah.
article right after that one was turn employee feedback into action, and it speaks to having what you can do to appease employees. And there were several things. I'm only going to read one of them, which is make sure employees feel heard. You may not take direct action on what they brought to you, but the fact that they're hearing you, the fact that they know that they have a safe space to go and to bring up a concern, share ideas, whatever the case is, you may not solve all their problems. But the fact that you look like you want them to be heard and what they say that comes out of their mouth has value, that goes a long way. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to point that out. It's in the same HBR from November, December 2024.
And we'll include these in the show notes, everybody, just so you
Of
know. You can.
course we will. And you know what else we should include in the show notes? I was
Mhm.
just recently, Don Ehlert, Don O, who is
Mhm.
a previous guest on this
Yeah.
program,
Love Don.
ecareercoaching.com,
Yeah.
had he's a resource for people who are changing their careers, and he was talking about quiet quitting, quiet firing, quiet layoffs. We're
Yeah.
talking about the Great Resignation. They're all related, and he was like, "Listen, you're in that position again for whatever reason, and I can be a resource." So we're not sitting here trying to
Mhm.
just to focus on one person, but since I just saw that recently, I was
Yeah.
like,
And even just following him on LinkedIn, he has some great content
great content. And he's
frequently.
very,
So
very active. Don Ehlert. We'll put it in the show
yeah,
notes.
we'll put his profile in there
But
for
but
sure.
it was right before we were going to tape this episode, and I was like, oh, this speaks to exactly what employees who may be between jobs or thinking about being between jobs can do to strengthen
Mhm.
their position in the interview process in the workplace. So we were
Yeah.
talking about how employers can sort of mitigate this potentially lost brain power of people that may want to get out of your organization. But what can you do as an employee if you're thinking about being part of that great resignation and finding the next thing? Good stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to highlight the bit that you said about, asking for input, getting the input, reflecting that you heard the
Yes.
feedback, in and of itself is an act of affirmation that helps people feel better, no doubt about it. But underscoring that just because they say it doesn't mean you have to do it. That's really important for leaders to hear too.
Well, yeah,
I
and that
totally,
was the
yeah,
point I was making
yep,
earlier.
that's
Like,
right.
you don't have to
That's
act on
why I'm
everything that's brought to
emphasizing.
your attention. Yeah. No, no, it's I heard you. It's that I hear what you're saying. I mean, that has that. It has such great value.
Yeah, it's just fascinating because I've heard that a few times recently, and it's just a good reminder. But just the act of asking for the input and the acknowledging of it is powerful and has great benefit just in and of itself. Whether you say the input is, I want a health club membership, or we want a health club on site. Maybe you don't have the money for that, and that's okay. But maybe you could offer online courses or online yoga once a week. There's always something that you could
Right.
do that you could say, I heard you and we can't go that far, but here's
Right.
something that we could do. What do you think of that? So,
It's almost like a negotiation, really. It's like, oh, they budged off of whatever they were on, so I made some progress, but
yeah.
I
And
didn't.
you respected your individual or your collective, whatever the case
Yeah,
may be, employees, by showing them that they were heard. So that's really what
absolutely.
it's about, communication, guys. At the end of the
That's
day, which is what this show is really all about.
that's why we that's why we
Keep
do this.
keep those lines of communication open actively. If you're not asking, you're not listening, and you won't be able to adapt. So ask,
Touche.
and listen more than you talk.
That's excellent advice all the time.
We hear it all the time.
We do indeed. Well, that's a lot to digest. We know, and again, we're going to provide some of these resources in the show notes to be of use to all of you that are listening. And that's going to do it for another edition of Can You Hear Me? I'm Rob Johnson. If you want to weigh in on the podcast or give us an idea for a topic, because people do a lot and we pursue them, please contact us at our Can You Hear Me podcast page on LinkedIn.
And I'm Eileen Rochford. If you like what you heard, please think about giving us a review of our show wherever you get your podcasts, maybe Apple, Spotify, etc., because your reviews help other listeners find our show. And we appreciate all of you. Thanks for listening. We hope you learned something today.